Good morning friends. Today's lecture is on pneumonia and this topic is divided into two parts. So there are two lectures on pneumonia. Learning objectives include describe etiology, pathogenesis, types and stages of pneumonia, describe morphology and complications of pneumonia including lung abscess. So before we start lecture, we'll see some basic things. So respiratory passages are divided into two parts, upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory tract. Upper respiratory tract includes the nasal cavity, pharynx and larynx, and lower respiratory tract includes trachea, bronchi and lungs. Then division of the trachea. So trachea is divided into primary bronchus, then secondary bronchus, tertiary bronchi, smaller bronchi, then bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles and alveoli in a pulmonary lobule. And histologically, this bronchiole is lined by the ciliated columnar epithelium and these are the alveoli. And these are the alveolar walls that also shows the presence of capillaries. So these are some anatomy and histological features of respiratory tract. Respiratory tract infections are most frequent than infections of the any other organ. So most of the persons experience this upper respiratory tract infections that are caused by the viruses, and that is common cold and pharyngitis. So what is pneumonia? Pneumonia is defined as any infection of the lung parenchyma. So pulmonary antimicrobial defense mechanism that protect us against the infection, and that include mucociliary blanket and alveolar macrophages. So how it protect? So a plethora of microorganisms including the viruses, bacteria and fungi that are inhaled daily, mainly in dust or aerosol particles, and the distance these particles travel into the respiratory tract is inversely proportional to their size. So larger particles are trapped in the mucociliary blanket that lines the nose and upper respiratory tract. These microorganisms that are trapped in the mucous layer are transported by the ciliary action to the back of the throat, and where they are swallowed and clear. By contrast, particles that are smaller than 5 microns are carried into the alveoli, and where they are phagocytosed by the resident alveolar macrophages or by the neutrophils that are recruited to the lung by the cytokines. So these local defense mechanisms protect us against infections, and there are some systemic defense mechanisms. So pneumonia can result when these local defense mechanisms are impaired or the systemic resistance of the host is lower. So local pulmonary defense mechanisms are impaired when there is a loss or suppression of the cough reflex, and that is seen in persons who have altered sensorium, anesthetized patients, neuromuscular disorders, some drugs or having chest pains. So all of these may lead to the aspiration of the gastric contents because of the loss of the cough reflex. And this aspiration of the gastric contents will lead to the damage to the respiratory lining and damage to the defense mechanism, local defense mechanism. Second thing is the dysfunction of this mucociliary apparatus, and that is seen in persons who are smoking, inhalation of the hot or corrosive gases, or person have viral diseases or genetic defects of the ciliary function, that is immotile cilia syndrome. So in immotile cilia syndrome there is a dysfunction of the ciliary function, so that will lead to the dysfunction of this mucociliary apparatus, so they predispose to the infections with the organisms. Then accumulations of the secretions. So that is seen in cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is caused by the mutation in CFTR gene, and this gene encodes the CFTR protein that regulates the movement of chloride and sodium ions across the epithelial cell membrane. So when there is a mutation in one or both copies of this gene, ion transport is defective, and that results in a buildup of the thick mucus throughout the body, that leading to the respiratory insufficiency and in bronchial obstruction. So in both the conditions there is accumulation of the secretions, and that will lead to superimposed infections. Other is interference with the phagocytic and bactericidal activities of the alveolar macrophages, and that is seen in persons who are smoking or taking the alcohol, or in anoxia where oxygen saturation is decreased, and in patients with pulmonary congestion and edema. These local defense mechanisms are impaired, so that will be exposed to the pneumonia. Now some factors that impair the resistance include the chronic diseases, immunologic deficiencies, or treatment with immunosuppressive agents, and leukopenia where low leukocyte count. Then genetic role. So this there is a germline mutations in MYD88. So normally this MYD88 is an adapter for the several toll-like receptors, and that is important for the activation of the transcription factor nuclear factor kappa beta, and that will protect against the infections. But when there is a mutations in MYD88, it will be associated with the destructive bacterial pneumonias, mainly pneumococcal pneumonias. Then defects in innate immunity, including neutrophil and complement defects or humoral immunodeficiency, that is the part of the adaptive immunity, will lead to the increased incidence of the infections with the pyogenic bacteria. And cell-mediated immune defects, either congenital or acquired, lead to the increased infections with the intracellular microbes. As we know that cell-mediated immunity is required for the defense against the intracellular microbes. So whenever there is a defect, it will lead to the increased infections with the mycobacteria, herpes viruses, and pneumocystis jirovecii, that is the fungi. So this is the pathogenesis of the pneumonia, how pneumonia occurs. Now several other points that also have to be emphasized. So most common cause of death in viral influenza epidemic is the superimposed bacterial pneumonia. First there is a viral infections, and that will impair the local defense mechanism, and superimposed because of this impairment of the local defense mechanism, there is a superimposed bacterial pneumonia, and that is the cause of death in this viral influenza epidemics. Second point is that although the portal of entry for most bacterial pneumonia is the respiratory tract, but hematogenous seeding of the lungs from another organ may occur, and in that case it may be difficult to distinguish from the primary pneumonia. So organisms reach the respiratory tract maybe by hematogenous route and lead to the pneumonia. Then patients with chronic diseases acquire the terminal pneumonias while hospitalized, and that is called hospitalized hospital acquired pneumonia or nosocomial infection because of the several factors. So bacteria that is common to the hospital environment have the acquired resistance to the antibiotics. Then opportunities for the spread are also increased in hospital settings. Invasive procedures such as the intubations and injections are common in hospitalized persons, and bacteria may contaminate that equipment used in the respiratory care units, and that lead to the spread of the infections. So this is the hospitalized infections. Then classification of pneumonia. So pneumonia is classified based on the etiologic agent, and if no pathogen can be isolated, which occurs in about 50% of the cases, in that things we have to see the clinical setting in which the infection occurs. And so pneumonia is classified in 7 distinct clinical settings, that is called the pneumonia syndromes. And these categories are community acquired acute pneumonia, healthcare associated pneumonia, hospital acquired pneumonia, aspiration pneumonia, chronic pneumonia, necrotizing pneumonia and lung abscess, and pneumonia in the immunocompromised host. And these organisms that are specific to the each category that is given in this table. And today we will discuss this community acquired pneumonia, and that includes the community acquired bacterial pneumonia and community acquired virus pneumonia. And remaining categories we will discuss in the next lecture. So community acquired acute pneumonia. So that is the lung infection in otherwise healthy individuals, and that is acquired from the normal environment. That is different from the hospital acquired pneumonia, where pneumonia occurs in hospitalized patients. This acute pneumonia may be bacterial or viral, and from clinical and radiological features we can differentiate between the bacterial and viral infections. But there are some serological markers like procalcitonin. So procalcitonin is the precursor of the calcitonin hormone, and that is elevated in some inflammatory conditions. And C-reactive protein, that is again an acute phase protein, and that both are secreted by the liver, and both are elevated in bacterial pneumonias more than the viral infections. Often this bacterial infection follows an upper respiratory tract viral infection, and bacterial invasion of the lung parenchyma causes the alveoli to be filled with an inflammatory exudate, and thus causing the consolidation of the pulmonary tissue, also known as the solidification of the pulmonary tissue. So normally these lungs are filled up by the air, but when there is inflammation, there is an exudate in the alveoli, and that lead to the consolidation. And in chest X-ray we can see this consolidation. So this that appears as a white patch in the chest X-ray. So this is the consolidated area. Some predisposing conditions that lead to the pneumonia are extremes of age patients, if have chronic diseases like congestive heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and diabetes, or have congenital or acquired immunodeficiencies and decreased or absent splenic functions. So all these conditions will predispose to the pneumonia, and this later condition, that is the decreased or absent splenic function, that increase the risk for infection with the encapsulated bacteria such as the pneumococcus. So there are vaccines available that contain the capsular polysaccharides from these common serotypes, and that are used in individuals that are at high risk for the pneumococcal sepsis. Now we'll discuss first community acquired bacterial pneumonia, and these are the common organisms that will lead to the bacterial pneumonia. These are Streptococcus pneumoniae, Haemophilus influenza, Moraxella catarrhalis, Staphylococcus aureus, Klebsiella pneumonia, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Legionella pneumophila, and Mycoplasma pneumonia. And we'll see each of these in detail, how it will lead to the pneumonia and what are the clinical features of this. So first is the Streptococcus pneumonia, that is the most common cause of the pneumonia. And for diagnosis we have to examine the Gram stain sputum, and in this Gram stain sputum there is a presence of these neutrophils and presence of this Streptococcus pneumoniae bacteria that are Diplococcus and lancet shaped. Diplococci because they occur in pair of two. Or isolation of pneumococci from blood culture is also possible, and it is more specific but less sensitive, because if culture is done in the early phase of the illness, then only few patients have positive blood cultures. So either from the Gram stain sputum or from the culture we can know the etiologic agent that caused the pneumonia. Then second is Haemophilus influenza, and that is the pleomorphic gram negative organism. So that occurs in both the forms, encapsulated and non-encapsulated forms. And there are 6 serotypes of the encapsulated forms, that are types A to F, of which type B is the most virulent form. So antibodies against this capsule protect the host from the H. influenza infections. So capsular polysaccharide B is incorporated in the widely used vaccine against the H. influenza, and with routine use of these vaccines, incidence of the disease caused by this B serotype has declined significantly. But by contrast, infections with non-encapsulated forms are increasing. But these infections are less virulent, but they spread along the surface of the upper respiratory tract. So that produce the otitis media, that is infection of the middle ear, sinusitis and bronchopneumonia, and also lead to the descending laryngotrachea bronchitis. So infection of the larynx, trachea and bronchitis. Then H. influenza infection in the children. H. influenza pneumonia, which follow a viral respiratory infection in pediatric patient, is an emergency and has a high mortality rate. And before a vaccine became widely available, this H. influenza was a common cause of suppurative meningitis in children up to 5 years of age, and that also causes an acute purulent conjunctivitis in children. So that lead to the suppurative meningitis as well as the conjunctivitis in the children, and also a cause of pneumonia. H. influenza infection in older patients lead to the septicemia, endocarditis, that is inflammation of the endocardium, pyelonephritis, cholecystitis and suppurative arthritis. And this H. influenza is also the most common bacterial cause of acute exacerbation of the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Then Moraxella catarrhalis, that is common in the elderly patient, and second most common cause of the acute exacerbation of the COPD after H. influenza. And these three organisms, Streptococcus pneumoniae, H. influenza and Moraxella catarrhalis, is one of the these three are the common causes of the otitis media in children. Then Staphylococcus aureus, that is the cause of secondary bacterial pneumonia in children and healthy adults following the viral respiratory illness. So first there is a viral infection and then superimposed bacterial infection, and these superimposed bacterial infections are common by this organism, that is Staphylococcus aureus. Also there is a high incidence of complications like lung abscess and empyema with this infection. Intravenous drug users are also at high risk for the development of this Staphylococcus pneumonia with the endocarditis. And it is also an important cause of hospital acquired pneumonia. Then Klebsiella pneumoniae, that is the most frequent cause of the gram-negative bacterial pneumonia, and that commonly affects the chronic alcoholic persons. And this thick mucoid, often blood-tinged sputum is characteristic because this organism produces an abundant viscid capsular polysaccharide. So these patients have thick mucoid sputum because of the presence of this viscid capsular polysaccharide. So patients have the difficulty in expectorating the sputum. Then Pseudomonas aeruginosa, that most commonly causes the hospital acquired infections, but it is mentioned in the community acquired bacterial pneumonia because of its occurrence in patients with cystic fibrosis and immunocompromised patients. And it has a propensity to invade the blood vessels, so that will lead to the extrapulmonary spread. So this Pseudomonas septicemia is a very fulminant disease. Then Legionella pneumophila is the agent of Legionnaire disease, that is the form of pneumonia that is caused by this organism, and that causes the Pontiac fever, that is the self-limited upper respiratory tract infection. And this organism flourishes in the artificial aquatic environment such as the water cooling towers and the tubic system of the domestic water supplies. So it is transmitted by both the things, either inhalation of the aerosolized organisms or aspiration of this contaminated drinking water, because that these organisms also flourishes in this uh, artificial aquatic environments. And diagnosis of this Legionella is done by the presence of DNA in the sputum using the PCR polymerase chain reaction test, or identification of the Legionella antigens in the urine, and culture. And culture remains a diagnostic gold standard, but it takes 3 to 5 days. And Mycoplasma pneumoniae, that is commonly occurs in children and young adults, and they occur as sporadically or as local epidemics in closed communities, that are schools, military camps, and prisoners. So these are the common organisms that will lead to the community acquired bacterial pneumonia. Then morphology of this bacterial pneumonia. So there are two patterns of anatomic distribution. One is lobular bronchopneumonia and lobar pneumonia. So this patchy consolidation of the lung is the dominant characteristic of bronchopneumonia, and consolidation of a large portion of a lobe or of the entire lobe, as it is seen here, that is known as the lobar pneumonia. Then this is the gross picture of the lung. So this is the bronchopneumonia, because here there is a patchy consolidation. Here also there is a presence of consolidation. And this is the lobar pneumonia, because whole lower lobe is uniformly consolidated. First we see the lobar pneumonia, and in lobar pneumonia there are 4 stages of the inflammatory response that classically been described, that are congestion, red hepatization, gray hepatization, and resolution. So first stage is the congestion, and in this these lungs are heavy, boggy, and red, and this reddish discoloration of the tissue is because of the congestion. And microscopically you see that these alveolar capillaries are engorged with the blood. So that is the congestion, first phase. Then second is red hepatization, and microscopically you see there is a massive confluent exudation of neutrophils, red cells, and fibrin that fill the alveolar spaces. So here red cells are increased. And on gross examination, this lobe is red in color, firm in consistency, and L-less. So it has a liver-like consistency, and hence the name hepatization. And because of the abundance of the presence of red cell, it is known as the red hepatization. Then gray hepatization. Here there is a disintegration of the red cells and only the presence of fibrinosuppurative exudates. So that result in the color change from red to grayish brown. And microscopically you see only the inflammatory cells and fibrin production. And this color change from red to gray, so it is known as the gray hepatization. And the last phase is the resolution of the inflammation. So here exudate that are present in the alveolar spaces are broken down by the enzymatic digestion, and that produce the granular semifluid debris, and this debris then ingested by the macrophages or organized by the fibroblasts that are growing into it. So here you can see these are the fibroblasts, and this is the resolution of the inflammation. The pleura are also involved by the inflammation. So pleural fibrinous reaction to the underlying inflammation often present in the early stages if the consolidation also extends to the lung surface, and that may also similarly resolve. So most often it undergoes organization and leaving fibrous thickening or permanent adhesions of this pleura. Then bronchopneumonia. So microscopically you see that here inflammatory exudate consists mainly of the neutrophils, and these neutrophils can be seen in the lumen of the small bronchus, then in the bronchus as seen here, and in the alveolar walls. And grossly, this bronchopneumonia shows the patchy involvement. So these are the patchy areas of the consolidation, and one lobe is involved, but there is more frequent involvement of the multilobar. So multilobes are involved, bilateral involvement, and base of the lungs are most commonly infected because tendency of the secretions to gravitate in the basal regions. And complications of this pneumonia. So first is abscess formation. So this reaction lead to the tissue destruction and necrosis. So that lead to the abscess formation, and that is common with the pneumococcal and Klebsiella infections. Second is spread of infections to the pleural cavity, so that cause the intrapleural fibrinosuppurative reaction that is known as the empyema. And third common complication is the bacteremic dissemination to the heart valves, pericardium, brain, kidney, spleen or joints. So there is that cause the abscess formation in the different organs or lead to the endocarditis, meningitis or suppurative arthritis. So multi-organ involvement. Clinical features how these patients present to us with pneumonia. They have high fever, shaking, chills, and cough that produce the mucopurulent sputum and hemoptysis, that is presence of blood in the sputum. And when pleuritis is present, so inflammation of pleura is also present, and it is accompanied by the pleuritic pain and pleural friction rub. This is the raspy breathing sound, and that can be auscultated by the stethoscope. This clinical picture is markedly modified by the administration of the effective antibiotics. So if we treat patient appropriately, then they become afebrile with few clinical signs within 48 to 72 hours after the initiation of the antibiotics. So we have to identify the specific organism, and then we have to do the antibiotic sensitivity. So this organism is sensitive to that particular antibiotic, and that specific antibiotic we have to prescribe to the patient. So here the identification of the organism and the determination of its antibiotic sensitivity are the keystones of the therapy. But fewer than 10% of the patients with pneumonia are severe enough so they merit hospitalization, and in most instances death results from the complication, as we have seen. These are the empyema, meningitis, endocarditis or pericarditis, and this complication will lead to the death. This is about the community acquired bacterial pneumonia. Now we will discuss community acquired viral pneumonia. So these are the common viral organisms that lead to the pneumonia are influenza virus type A and B, respiratory syncytial viruses, human metapneumovirus, adenovirus, rhinoviruses, rubella and varicella viruses. And we see some virus in detail. And any of these viral agents can cause a mild upper respiratory tract infection that is recognized as the common cold, but it can lead to the severe lower respiratory tract infection. And factors that favor the extension of this infection into the lung are the extremes of age patient, malnutrition, alcoholism, or having underlying debilitating illnesses. So these persons are prone to develop the lower respiratory tract infection. Pathogenesis of viral pneumonia. So these viruses have tropisms so that allow them to attach to and enter the host respiratory lining cells. Then inside host cell there is a replication and gene expression, and that lead to the cytopathic changes. So damage to the cells and induce the cell death and secondary inflammation. And this secondary inflammation will lead to the damage to the local pulmonary defense mechanism, so such as the mucociliary clearance, and they predispose to the superimposed infections by the bacterium. And these superimposed infections are more serious than only the viral infection. First, see the influenza viruses. So influenza viruses of type A that infect the humans as well as pigs, horses, and some and birds, and they are the major cause of pandemic as well as the epidemic. This influenza genome encodes several proteins, but the most important for the viral virulence are the hemagglutinin and neuraminidase proteins. This hemagglutinin has the 3 major subtypes, while neuraminidase has the 2 subtypes. And these both the proteins are embedded in a lipid bilayer and that constitute the influenza virus envelope. So what are the function of this hemagglutinin and neuraminidase? This hemagglutinin is particularly important because it serves to attach the virus to its cellular target via this sialic acid residue on the surface polysaccharides. And following uptake of this virus into the endosomal vesicles, there is acidification of the endosome, and that triggers the conformation change in the hemagglutinin. So that allows this viral envelope to fuse with the host cell membrane and releasing the viral genomic RNAs into the cytoplasm of the cell. Now this virus is inside the host cell, and then there is a replication of this virus with the host cell. And then comes the role of this neuraminidase. So neuraminidase in turn facilitates the release of these newly formed virions that are budding from the infected cells by cleaving the sialic acid residues. So neutralizing host antibodies against both the proteins, that are viral hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, are protective against the infection with the influenza virus. This viral genome is composed of 8 single-stranded RNAs and that encode one or more proteins, and these RNAs are packaged into the helices by the nucleoproteins. So that determine the influenza virus type, either it is A, B or C, and this influenza virus type A is predominates throughout the world, and that is common. Now we see two important concepts, that is antigenic drift and antigenic shift. So what is antigenic drift? This is the antigenic changes that is caused by the spontaneous mutations, so that alter the antigenic epitopes on the viral hemagglutinin and neuraminidase proteins, and that result in a new viral strains that are partly different. This is not totally different, but these are the, because of the spontaneous mutation, that is partly different. So these new strains that bear sufficient resemblance to the prior strains. So some members of the population are partly resistant to infection because they can have the antibodies to the prior strain. So that protects partially protects the population from this infection, and that is antigenic drift, and that lead to the epidemic. Then antigenic shift. So what is antigenic shift? When both the hemagglutinin and neuraminidase genes are replaced through recombination with animal influenza viruses. So here these are totally different. So these all individuals are susceptible to this new influenza virus because they don't have pre-existing antibodies to these new viruses, and that lead to the pandemic of the infections. So if this host that lacks the protective antibodies, then this virus infects the pneumocytes and elicits several cytopathic changes, so damage to the cells. So what happens? Shortly after entry into the pneumocytes, this viral infection inhibits the sodium channels in the cells, so that produce the electrolyte and water shifts. So there is a fluid accumulation in the alveolar lumen. Then this is followed by the death of the infected cells through several mechanisms. So that lead to the inhibition of the host cell messenger RNA translation. So these new proteins are not produced. Then activation of the caspases, so that lead to the apoptosis of the cell, and the death of these epithelial cells exacerbate the fluid accumulation, and that release the danger signals, so that activate the resident macrophages. So all these mechanisms lead to the death of the infected cells. And in addition, prior to the death of these infected cells, these infected epithelial cells release a variety of inflammatory mediators, including the several chemokines and cytokines, so that lead to the more and more inflammation. So they add the fuel to the inflammatory fire. And in some cases, this viral infection may cause sufficient lung injury so that produce the acute respiratory distress syndrome in the patients. But more often, this severe pulmonary disease that stems from the superimposed bacterial pneumonia. So this viral infection, because of there is a defect in local pulmonary mechanism, there is a superimposed bacterial pneumonia, and that is the severe pulmonary disease. And the most common cause of this superimposed bacterial pneumonia is the Staphylococcus aureus, and that is often life-threatening. So control of the infection relies on the several host mechanisms. So we have several defense mechanisms that control this infection. So what are these mechanisms? So the presence of these viral products that induces the innate immune responses in the infected cells. So they produce the production of this alpha and beta interferon, and these mediators then upregulate the expression of the MX1 gene that encode a GTP, and that interferes with the viral gene transcription and viral replication. So that inhibit the viral replication. Then second is natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells can recognize and kill the infected host cells. So limit the viral replication and viral spread to adjacent pneumocytes. And cellular immune responses is the cellular immune responses is then eventually augmented by the development of antibody responses, that is humoral responses to the viral hemagglutinin and neuraminidase proteins. So these control mechanisms can protect us from the viral infection. Then insight into the future pandemic, how this future pandemic occur. That insight come from the studying past pandemic. So what then might be the source of the next great pandemic? So there is no certainty, but one concern is centered on the avian influenza that normally infects the birds. And one such strain, that is type H5N1, that has already spread throughout the world in wild and domestic birds. But fortunately, the transmission of this current H5N1 avian virus is insufficient. But if this H5N1 influenza, if recombines with an influenza type that is highly infectious for humans, this new strain can result that is capable of the sustained human to human transmission because of this recombination, and that can be the cause of the next great pandemic. Second is human metapneumovirus. This is the paramyxovirus and is associated with upper and lower respiratory tract infections. Young children, elderly adults, and immunocompromised patients are more susceptible, and that will lead to the bronchiolitis and pneumonia, and that are severe. The first human metapneumovirus infection occurs during early childhood, but reinfections are common throughout the life, and that are especially common in the older subjects. Diagnostic methods for detection of this organism include the PCR test for the viral RNA, and treatment generally focuses on the supportive measures. So we only have to give the supportive measures if the patient have this infection, although work is ongoing for the clinically effective and safe vaccine. Then third is SARS, that is severe acute respiratory syndrome. And this SARS that is first appeared in November 2002 in the Guangdong province of the China, and that subsequently spread to the Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam and Toronto, and where large outbreaks also occur. And the ease of travel between these continents clearly contributed to this initial rapid spread, but this epidemic went no further. And the last case of this SARS where laboratory associated infections were reported in April 2004. So that is the 2002 to 2004 epidemic by this SARS virus, and the cause of this SARS was a new coronavirus, that is SARS-CoV-1. And this many upper respiratory infections are caused by the viruses, coronaviruses. But the SARS virus is different from the other coronaviruses because it infected the lower respiratory tract infection and also spread throughout the body. And as we know that other pandemic is also ongoing by this coronaviruses. So in December 2019, a SARS-CoV-2 infection, that is a new strain of coronavirus, and that closely related to that one that causes the SARS, and that was discovered in the Wuhan, China. And this new strain causes the COVID-19, a disease which has spread worldwide and also leading to an ongoing pandemic, and that has also killed millions of the people. Now the morphological features of this viral pneumonia. So though all viral infections are genetically different, but they produce the similar morphologic changes. Upper respiratory infections are marked by the presence of mucosal hyperemia and swelling, and infiltration of the submucosa by the mononuclear cells, mainly lymphocytes and monocytes. As in viral infection, there are presence of mainly presence of these mononuclear cells, and overproduction of the mucus secretions. On all these changes are because of the inflammation. This swollen mucosa and viscous exudate because of the presence of mucus secretions that may plug the nasal channels, sinuses, or the eustachian tubes, so that lead to the that can lead to the suppurative secondary bacterial infection. Then virus-induced tonsillitis that cause the hyperplasia of the lymphoid tissue within the Waldeyer ring, and that is frequent in children. In viral laryngotracheobronchitis and bronchiolitis, there is a vocal cord swelling and abundant mucus production. And plugging of the small airways may give rise to the focal lung atelectasis, that is the collapse of the part of the lung. And if there is a more severe bronchial involvement, there is a widespread plugging of the secondary and terminal airways by the cell debris, fibrin, and inflammatory exudate, and that can lead to the organization and fibrosis, and that will result in the obliterative bronchiolitis and permanent lung damage. Grossly, this lung involvement may be quite patchy, or that can involve the whole lobes bilaterally or unilaterally, and the affected areas are red, blue, and congested. Histologic pattern depends on the severity of the disease, and the predominant is the interstitial inflammatory reaction that involves the walls of the alveoli, and alveolar septa are widened and edematous, and that usually contain a mononuclear inflammatory infiltrate of lymphocytes, macrophages, and occasionally plasma cells. So these are the inflammatory changes. And in severe cases, neutrophils may also be present. The alveoli may be free of exudate, but in many patients there is a intra-alveolar proteinaceous material and a cellular exudate. And when it is complicated by the acute respiratory distress syndrome, there is a pink hyaline membrane that line these alveolar walls. So there is a separate lecture in acute respiratory distress. So this shows the histologic feature, and in viral pneumonia there is a predominance this alveolar septa are edematous, and that shows the inflammatory infiltrate that comprising of the lymphocytes, macrophages, and plasma cells, and in severe cases there may be presence of the neutrophils, and this alveoli may be free of exudate, or it can show the proteinaceous material or cellular exudate. And if it is complicated by the ARDS, there may be presence of the pink hyaline membrane that line this alveoli. Some viruses such as the herpes simplex, varicella, and adenovirus that may be associated with the necrosis of the bronchial and alveolar epithelium and acute inflammation. And characteristic cytopathic changes can be seen. So some cytopathic changes are specific to some viruses. So some viruses that replicate within the cells and that make the viral aggregates, and that are visible as the inclusion bodies, and these inclusion bodies are seen in herpes virus, adenovirus, or that can induce the cells to fuse and that form the multinucleated cells. So that can be seen histologically. Superimposed bacterial infection, if occurs, then it modifies the picture and that cause the ulcerative bronchitis, bronchiolitis and bacterial pneumonia superimposed. Then clinical features, how this patient presents. So clinical course of this viral pneumonia is extremely varied, and even individuals with well developed atypical pneumonia have only few localizing symptoms. Cough may be absent and the major manifestation may consist only of the fever, headache and myalgia. The edema and exudation often cause the ventilation perfuse mismatch, so that lead to the hypoxemia, so decreased oxygen concentration in the lungs. These viral pneumonias are usually mild and they can resolve spontaneously without any lasting sequelae. But however, this interstitial viral pneumonia that is caused by the influenza virus lead to the significant morbidity and mortality. So in summary, I summarize this lecture that what is pneumonia? That is the broadly defined as infection of the lung parenchyma. Then we have seen the pathogenesis. There is a presence of local and systemic defense mechanisms, and how impairment of this defense mechanism lead to the pneumonia. Then we have seen the classification of the pneumonia, and this pneumonia is divided into 7 different categories. And today in lecture we have discussed community acquired bacterial pneumonia and community acquired viral pneumonia. Community acquired bacterial pneumonia, and we have seen common organisms that lead to this bacterial pneumonia. Then morphologically it is divided into lobar type and bronchopneumonia, and stages of lobar pneumonia that include the congestion, red hepatization, gray hepatization and resolution. And then in community acquired viral pneumonia, we have seen the common organisms that lead to the viruses, their pathogenesis and morphological features and complications. Thank you.